Copa America is just around the corner, so let's just stop wasting time and get right into the previews. Unlike the Euros, Copa America has only 4 groups, and Group A consists of Argentina, Peru, Chile, and Canada. Argentina are 15-time winners of this tournament. In fact, they're actually the reigning champions after breaking a 28-year drought back in 2021, and the man behind that success is manager Lionel Scaloni. Since taking over in 2018, he's won Argentina the Copa America, the Finalissima, and their 3rd World Cup title, Argentina's first since 1986. Scaloni hopes to retain the Copa America, and he has everything to make that happen. Argentina has a really solid defense backed by one of the best keepers in this tournament, Emi Martinez. And if Argentina ever find themselves in a penalty shootout, it's guaranteed it's going to be Argentina going through with Emi Martinez in net. Argentina's midfield should also be very fun to watch as well. You have the likes of Alexis McAllister and Messi's bodyguard, Rodrigo de Paul. And while things haven't really worked out well for Enzo Fernandez at Chelsea, he was incredible in the World Cup of 2022 for Argentina. So expect some of the same, as this is a team that actually knows how to use him. Then you got the attack. Julian Alvarez has been trusted up top as of late, but he hasn't really scored since the World Cup. And then there's Lautaro Martinez, and the thing with him is that there's probably more of a chance he causes more casualties in the US than gun violence this summer. But have no fear, because Lionel Messi is still unbelievable for his country. And with less pressure than the last Copa America, I expect him to be a monster full of spectacles. Peru are 2-time winners, and the last time they actually won Copa America was back in 1975. They finished 4th in the 2021 edition, but I can't really see that happening again. Their manager back then was Ricardo Gareca, a man who basically turned the entire program around. However, he left after 2022, and the manager that followed was Juan Reynoso, and he was terrible. So now leading the front is Jorge Fossati, who 20 years ago guided Uruguay to a 3rd place finish. Whether the 71-year-old can work magic or not, there are still a lot of concerns for this Peruvian squad. For one, the majority of the core is extremely old. In fact, they are the oldest team going into this tournament. You have starters like forward Gianluca Lapadula and defender Carlos Zambrano, who are both 34 years old. Hell, Paulo Guerrero, who this team still kind of relies upon, is 40 years old. That isn't the only issue though, because the next generation isn't exactly that promising. And these 2 factors so far have been detrimental to Peru's qualification campaign for 2026. Because right now, they're last, having scored just once and conceded 8 in 6 games. There isn't much hope, but if there is anyone that could lead this team to any success, it's either Renato Tapia or goalkeeper Pedro Gallese. Gallese in particular has been pretty solid in goal, despite his backline doing him absolutely no favors. Meanwhile, Tapia can provide his horrid backline some extra cover. Chile, during their golden generation, were back-to-back winners in 2015 and 2016. 2016 in particular saw the Chileans sweep every single award: goal scorer, golden boot, and also golden glove. This team has been on a bit of a decline, and that showed definitely in the last one, as they only reached the quarterfinals. Their current manager is Ricardo Gareca, the former manager of Peru. Peru and Chile have quite a rivalry, by the way. Gareca's magic hasn't disappeared yet, it seems, because recently Chile beat Albania 3-0. They also beat Paraguay with the same scoreline and only lost 3-2 to France in France. The squad itself is definitely far from the days of when it used to torment Messi, but with one of the best proven managers in South America, Chile could have a decent run this year. One player that's been really hot going into the tournament is forward Victor Davila. Under Gareca, he scored 3 goals in 3 games this year. 24-year-old midfielder Marcelino Nunez has also showed some promise. There's also forward Ben Baraton Diaz, who impressed a lot during 2023, but hasn't really played that much, probably because Gareca wants him to learn Spanish.
English or Spanish?
But that said, he could still provide a spark here or there. And believe it or not, Alexis Sanchez and Eduardo Vargas are both still consistently playing for this team. And they haven't been bad either. In fact, Sanchez can still give you a glimpse of the past here or there. For Canada, this is their first appearance. Technically. They originally were invited back in 2001, but that tournament was cancelled. This resulted in the Canadian camp disbanding, but then the tournament decided to be reinstated, and Canada didn't have enough time to form their team again.
But you can't do this to me.
You know how much I sacrificed?
You have to also remember that back then, Canada wasn't exactly a program that had money. They still don't really have money, but they really didn't have money back then. Either way, they are back. Probably. Their manager is no longer the TED Talk man, Instead, it is American Jesse Marsch. We just did a video about him. Marsch's last job was at Leeds, where his tactics were terrible, and all he would do is blame his players for losing. But perhaps he's here to redeem himself and learn from his mistakes with a pretty young Canadian side. This team has been promising for a few years now, it's just a matter if it can consistently translate onto the pitch. That and also whether or not the defense will stop leaking goals. And we've seen glimpses of that recently from 21-year-old midfielder Ismail Kone. In a recent 0-0 draw with France, he was covering space everywhere. But if Canada want to have a memorable inaugural tournament, they'll need their stars to perform at their peak. Jonathan David, despite barely having any help, has been one of the best Liga strikers in the past 5 years. He's shown glimpses of that for his country, but when it matters the most, he seems to just disappear. Then there's Alphonso Davies, arguably one of the best fullbacks in the world, and he has done so much PR for Canada. Easily one of the most important players with his unstoppable speed and incredible defensive ability. He can also play on the wing, in fact he did for the national team for quite a bit, but it seems like he's being actually put into fullback position this time around with Jesse Marsch. Looking at this group, it's pretty obvious that the favorites to win it will be Argentina. And from there, second place could be decided by really anyone, but I'm thinking it's gonna be either Chile or Canada. Over to Group B now, and we have Mexico, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Jamaica. For Mexico, this is their 11th appearance, with their best finish coming in 1993 and 2001 when they were runners-up. Their last appearance, though, was back in 2016 when they reached the quarterfinals, but I don't think Mexican fans want to remember that tournament. Their current manager is Jaime Lozano. He's been at the job since last summer, and Mexico has been pretty underwhelming. He's to blame for some of it, but the bigger problem at hand is the direction that Mexican football is finding itself in. If you look at the majority of the squad, most of the players in their mid-20s are playing in a domestic league that doesn't care about anything but money, and the overall performances have suffered because of that. Mexico barely escaped Honduras in the Nations League quarterfinals last year. They also drew with Uzbekistan 3-0 and Australia 2-0 in the US, where there's like a majority of just Mexican fans. And speaking of the US, they've been consistently fathered by them since 2020. Indeed, these are some pretty dark days, considering this was a team that once was able to fight against some of South America's best. But there are a few players that could maybe get Mexico out of this rut in this tournament. Whether or not that actually helps them in the future or prolongs this constant complacency, who knows? Johan Vazquez has played a majority of his matches at Genoa and helped them finish 11th, while Santiago Jimenez has scored 23 goals for Feyenoord. If he can replicate that kind of form for his country finally, Mexico have a lifeline. And finally, there's captain Edson Alvarez. The defensive midfielder had a really solid debut season for West Ham, and his ability to cover space will be crucial for Mexico. For Ecuador, this is their 30th appearance. They've actually never won the tournament in 30 appearances. Well, I guess 29. The farthest they've ever gone is the semifinals, where they've actually placed fourth 2 times, back in 1959 and 1993. Their last finish, though, saw them reach the quarterfinals in 2021. But perhaps we could see a dark horse run for La Tri this year. Under former Qatar manager Felix Sanchez, the Ecuadorians have had good results thanks to solid defensive performances. Their most notable victory was a 2-1 result against Uruguay. Ignore what happened in the last few minutes. And since that Copa America in 2021, Ecuador has overseen the blossoming of numerous young talents. Just to name a few, you have 22-year-old defender Piero Hincapié and 22-year-old midfielder Jeremy Sarmiento. Then there's 17-year-old attacking midfielder Kendry Pais, who on his debut recorded the game-winning assist. Then just a month later, he scored his first goal for Ecuador. And of course, you can't forget about Moises Caicedo. Considering his price tag, he was a flop for Chelsea. However, with every game that he's played, he looks more and more comfortable in his role. Not to mention for Ecuador, he was fantastic in the World Cup at just age 20. Mix in there some veterans like forward Enner Valencia and defender Felix Torres, and you got yourself a pretty solid team. However, Pervis Estupiñán missing out on injury will hurt them quite a bit. This is Venezuela's 20th appearance, and their best finish was 4th back in 2011. Their last finish, however, in 2021, saw them crash out in the groups, which is impressively awful considering 8 of the 10 teams in that tournament made it to the knockouts. Venezuela will be hoping to actually make it out of the groups this time, and with Mexico struggling, this opens the door for Venezuela, especially because this team has kind of risen from its grave. Venezuela's current manager, Fernando Batista, has helped his team grind out a really solid start in qualifiers. La Vinotinto currently sit 4th, with their most impressive performance being a 1-1 draw away in Brazil. Now, was that Brazil side awful? Yes. But let's just give this to Venezuela, come on. Venezuela has been really solid at the back, and a lot of that is thanks to goalkeeper Rafael Romo. Look out for defensive midfielder Yangel Herrera as well. He was really good for Girona last season, and Venezuela will hope for that same consistency this summer. In attack, winger Darwin Machis could be a source for goals, but the main guy up top Venezuela will be banking on is Solomon Rondon. For Jamaica, this is their third appearance. Their last appearance saw them finish as the second worst team in 2016. By the way, if you didn't know this, Jamaica has one of the funniest federations, because during the last World Cup, Leon Bailey literally talked about how corrupt the JFF was on a podcast. This podcast, by the way, is still up on YouTube. And I guess the Federation didn't care because he was still selected for matches after. And then this year, Jamaica called him up for Copa America, and he's refused to join the squad entirely. Anyways, Jamaica's current coach is former Icelandic manager Heimir Hallgrímsson. Quite a culture shift, that. Under his management, there's been glimpses, but really, that's kind of been the story of Jamaica for the past decade. Either way, though, they beat Canada 4-all in aggregate in the Nations League quarterfinals, and then they nearly beat an underwhelming US team had it not been for pure luck. Jamaica's squad is filled with dual nats. Defender Ethan Pinnock, midfielder Casey Palmer, forward Damari Gray, and forward Mikel Antonio. Hell, Ravel Morrison once played for Jamaica. But the best of the diaspora is Bobby De Cordova Reed. Last year he had 4 goals in 10 caps. However, no one is going to be more crucial to this Jamaican side than goalkeeper Andre Blake. He is the best keeper in North America right now, and for sure he will be holding down the fort for Jamaica's hopes. Looking at Group B, Ecuador are definitely the favorites to win this group. After that, it's more so a battle between Mexico and Venezuela. Jamaica could maybe throw in a jab here or there, but I'm not sure really about that. Next we have Group C, which consists of the host, the United States, Uruguay, Panama, and Bolivia. For the US, this is their 5th appearance, with their best finish coming in 4th back in 1995 and 2016, which was their last appearance. 1995, though, in particular, was quite special, as they had to beat Argentina to reach the knockouts, and then they also beat Mexico on penalties. Now, as we mentioned before, the US once again hosts this edition of the tournament, even if for the most part, their fans will still be outnumbered by everyone else. But this is a great chance for the new generation of American talent to show off what they have. Matt Turner will be the man in goal, and although he's absolutely terrible with his feet, he is unstoppable as a shot saver. In the defense, you have some really solid options like Premier League defenders and Chris Richards and Anthony Robinson, but it's gotta be Joe Scally to look out for because he single-handedly caused Ronaldinho to give up on his own country. Over in the midfield, you have a ton of tools, but attacking midfielder Gio Reyna will be that creative difference. And finally, there's the X Factor, the man that bleeds red, white, and blue. Christian Pulisic. 12 goals, 8 assists, kicked Nazi ass, my president. But hold your horses, fellas, because unfortunately this team will be held back by Greg Berhalter. His one-dimensional tactics will more than likely make every single one of these players very underwhelming and poor. Can't wait. Uruguay has 15 titles, with the last one coming back in 2011 when Luis Suarez won MVP at 24 years old. Uruguay's last finish, though, was in 2021 where they reached the quarterfinals. However, this year, some are seeing a pretty deep run for Uruguay. And it makes sense because, for one, the squad has a ton of quality. In defense, you have the likes of Jose Jimenez and Ronald Araujo. Midfield, there's Rodrigo Bentancur and Manuel Ugarte. Federico Valverde, one of the best box-to-box midfielders in the world. Then in attack, you got the likes of Facundo Pellistri and even Luis Suarez at like 37 years old. But the main guy up top has to be Darwin Nunez. And I know what you're thinking. Sure, he may be a little inconsistent for Liverpool, but every single time he puts on that blue shirt, things seem to change because he has been deadly. In fact, he is the top scorer in World Cup qualifiers for South America right now with 5 in 6 games. Now this all sounds great, but with all these different players, you're gonna need a manager to mesh all that together and create some kind of chemistry. And they have just that in Marcelo Bielsa. His kamikaze style of football, which requires so much energy, has worked so well for the team so far. He's helped Uruguay beat Brazil and even Argentina away from home. Not to mention, the nation's latest friendly saw them destroy Mexico 4-0. And guess what? Darwizzy hat trick. Uruguay are not the hottest team going into this tournament. There's still another team we need to talk about, but they're pretty close. This is Panama's second appearance in the Copa America. They made their debut back in 2016 and didn't make it out of the group, but to be fair to them, they did have both finalists in their group. They hope to have better fortunes with their current manager, Thomas Christensen, who's been in charge since 2020. And I'd say there's been pretty good reason to trust this guy for so long now. Last year in the Gold Cup, Panama beat the US in the quarterfinals and just nearly missed out on the final. Panama also seems to be miles away from their rivals too, because they recently beat Costa Rica 6-1 on aggregate in the Nations League quarterfinals. Defender Jose Cordoba of Norwich City has been a pretty solid staple in this team. It will be pretty unfortunate though that one of his defensive partners, Andres Andrade, will be out for the tournament due to injury. Fullback Michael Murillo could make some noise as well. He plays a semi-decent role for Marseille. The key to Panama's success, however, is Yoel Barcenas. He's going to be the main creative catalyst for this team. Oh, and by the way, did you know that recently Panama played friendlies against the Catalonian national team and the Galician national team? Believe it or not, there was once a period when Bolivian football fans were not always on suicide watch, because back in 1963, they won the tournament as hosts. They were also runners-up in 1997 as hosts, living up to that sea-level merchant name. Their last finish, however, saw them crash out as the worst team in 2021, and they'll be hoping to make it out of the groups for the first time since 2015. And I can't lie, it ain't looking good. Their all-time scorer, Marcelo Moreno, recently retired, and the rest of their squad... On one bright side though, after manager Antonio Carlos Zago took over Bolivia, the team immediately grabbed a win versus Peru. It was their first competitive win in over 2.5 years. That said, Peru is terrible and Bolivia are sea-level merchants, and unfortunately for them, they will not have any of their games in Denver. Now if there's one player that I think could stand out, it's probably Ramiro Vaca. Looking at Bolivia's recent and dismal results, he's been the most reliable scorer. But also, keep an eye on Miguel Terceros. The 20-year-old midfielder plays for Santos and did recently score against Ecuador, even if they did lose 3-1. Looking at this group, it's pretty clear who's probably going to go through. Uruguay are the favorites, while the US will probably claim second. But you never know, maybe Berhalter's magic will cause Panama to actually have a chance, you just never know. And finally, we have Group D, Brazil, Colombia, Paraguay, and Costa Rica. Brazil has won this tournament 9 times, with their last one coming back in 2019. And that was a very odd tournament because Everton scored 3 goals and won Golden Boot because of it. But Brazil's last finish in 2021 saw them lose to Argentina in the finals. Seleção hope to reclaim what's theirs, but the forecast isn't as promising as it should be, because Brazil have been just very underwhelming as of late, especially in World Cup qualifiers. Right now, they're hanging on to the last automatic spot after 6 games. As a result, they brought in Dorival Jr. as manager, and things have been more so up and down. There was the 1-0 win versus England in London, but there was also the draw with the US team that had just lost 5-1 to Colombia. And then just to make things worse, Ronaldinho went on social media and said this is the worst Brazilian team he's ever seen. It also doesn't help that this team no longer has Neymar. But despite that, Brazil has an overwhelming amount of talent in the final third. You have Rodrigo and Rafinha, but the best of the best has to be Vini Jr., who is currently on a Ballon d'Or run right now. 15 goals in La Liga last season, and then 6 goals and 4 assists, including 1 in the final to help Real Madrid win their 15th title. The only issue is, for Brazil, he's kind of ass. It's fine though, because just in time, the Romario regen has appeared. Endrick. If you don't know who Endrick is, just imagine like a raw fusion of Pele and Ronaldo. And also imagine him being 17 years old. He's also scored 3 times already for the national team, against the likes of Spain and England. Now for the rest of the squad, it's pretty decent. I wouldn't say it's really up there with the attack. Midfield, you got Lucas Paqueta for creativity and Bruno Guimaraes for defensive duties. And then in defense, you have center back Marquinhos and goalkeeper Alisson to hold down the fort. Colombia have just 1 title, and that was back in 2001 when they hosted the tournament. It's been a while, but this year could actually be Colombia's best chance to win their second. Because since taking over the team in 2022, Nestor Lorenzo has completely turned around the underwhelming Colombians. As of this recording, they are on a 22-match unbeaten run. This includes wins against Brazil, Germany, Spain. Fullback Daniel Munoz was very impressive for Crystal Palace near the end of last season. And speaking of Palace, Jefferson Lerma for both club and country has been a very solid defensive midfielder. He rarely ever misses a step, and while his contributions are quiet, they'll be very important. Also, it's kind of wild seeing this Colombian side actually scoring goals, because only just 2 years ago, they've just had no concept of how to score a goal. Winger John Arias has been on fire, scoring 3 times this year. There's also attacking midfielder James Rodriguez, who continues to defy age and plays such an important role in this team. Colombia also has some backup firepower in Luis Sinisterra and the exciting John Duran. But the most important player for this team will 100% be Luis Diaz. He's one of the best dribblers in the world and will take on anyone without any fear. Not to mention, he's coming off a career year. He was arguably Liverpool's best player of the season. If he's able to polish up his finishing just a little bit, good luck for the opposition. But the question now is, with this reputable unbeaten run, can Colombia, like nations before them, take this momentum all the way? Paraguay has 2 Copa America titles. That's right. They have more than Colombia. They won them back in 1953 and also 1979, and their last finish was the quarterfinals in 2021. Replicating that same feat, though, could be quite difficult. As you already know, Brazil and Colombia are in this group, not to mention Paraguay's form has been pretty goddamn awful. In qualifiers right now, they sit 7th, having scored just 1 single goal. But despite the awful scoring record, Daniel Garnero's side has been quite solid defensively. Paraguay's backline includes center back Omar Alderete, whose experience in La Liga will come in handy. But the 2 men that Paraguay hope to see on their A games this summer is Miguel Almiron and Julio Enciso. Almiron didn't have a great campaign for Newcastle, but his acceleration makes him a pain for any defender, while 20-year-old Julio Enciso is the country's new hope. Paraguay desperately missed his creativity during qualifiers, so maybe they can turn things around here. And finally, the last team, Costa Rica, who is making their 6th appearance in this tournament. Their best finishes came in 2001 and 2004 when they reached the quarterfinals. However, in their last appearance in 2016, they didn't make it out of the groups, and their chances of making it out this time, not looking so bright, especially now that their greatest ever goalkeeper Keylor Navas is retired. But while 2024 may not be their year, I would say the future looks alright for Costa Rica going forward. No longer are they senior citizens FC. We're actually starting to see a bit of a rebuild period. You got players like 23-year-old Orlando Gallo, 24-year-old Anthony Contreras, 20-year-old Brandon Aguilera, and 19-year-old Josimar Brenes. And their current manager right now is Gustavo Alfaro. Alfaro was responsible for leading Ecuador to World Cup 2022 after an 8-year absence. His Ecuadorian side also put up good fights against Brazil and Argentina in the last qualifiers, so that experience could be very useful. For Group D, it's pretty similar to Group C, where there's definitely 2 teams that will more than likely go through. Colombia are the favorites, I would say, to win the group, while Brazil will probably edge out in second. And that was your Copa America preview. Sorry that it took so long to get out. The Euros are kind of taking up all my time. But who do you think will win this tournament? Will it be the ones that are very hot right now, like Colombia or Uruguay? Or will it be a team that has more experience? Maybe Argentina? Maybe Brazil. I'm not sure about Brazil, honestly. Or maybe we'll have a shocker. The US? Don't make me laugh. But of course, a massive shout out to all our members, including Janos Balas, Brazilian Fury, Respect the Jeff, Adnasir Makalankong, Alex Rod, Ulta, Miguel Munoz, Return Fire, Rory Burns, Slider Kid, Snifrix, Takuoka Fan, The Cypriot 35, Not Windows 95 Man, Kentra Agatra, Big Boris the Baby Eater II, Kirbo, Unkwell, St. Terrence, Sylvia Citrus, Ryan Jens, Wise Orange, Rashford Enthusiast, Cocosaurus Rex, LeJames Bronze, Samu, Just MRC, Cheesebait, Cooper Rory, The Somali Pirate, Claymore Roomba, Wintergel, M4 Does Stuff, Finn Likes Rugby More, Davox, The Porter Geyser, TPSK25, Polar Protos, Chris Visconti, Dominic Griffin, Kyler Krebs, Lucien Von Croix, Mohamed Al-Tanib, Nish, Patrick Barley, Rashford God 5, Raspberry Ale, subscribe to 10-Day Tim, and Unbroken Persona. If you'd like to join the new members page and support the channel even more, there will be a link down below and up in the annotations. You can follow me on Twitter if you want, follow my Instagram if you like, follow my Twitch. I'll be doing some watch-alongs for the Euros and maybe Copa America. It depends. But yeah, until then, I'll see you guys.